I'm Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist with degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy, and a national certification in integrative mental health. In this video, I'm not looking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these. And the earth was filled with violence. Genesis 6:11. And the sons of Noah that went forth from the ark were Shem and Ham and Japheth. And of them was the whole earth overspread. Genesis 9:18-19. We're going to talk about it. But first, let me say hello to some people. And you guys might notice that the studios had a little bit of an upgrade. So hopefully everybody can hear me okay. If you can hear me okay, put a 1 in the chat. If not, put a 2. You know the drill. Let's say hi to some people. Adric is here. He says it's on. Auntie is here. Hi with the peace sign. Hi, Auntie, my favorite Auntie. Armando is here. Peace to you as well. Adric says, let's hear it for the dancing Maggies. Snowman's here, batting cleanup. Welcome the dancing Maggies. Definitely. Leon is here. He is part of the best live tribe on YouTube, as are all of you. And everybody watching from the clouds, please feel free to say hello. Cutting up with the Joneses is here. All right, I see some ones. Adrian is here, says, let's go. Andrea is here. Everybody's here. All right. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about it because I think something else is going on here. Now, let's see if we can get this slideshow going. Okay. I was trying a new way to do it and it didn't save it. Well, shoot. Okay, I'm going to try it a different way. Hold on. We'll do that. Do it the old way. Definitely do it the old way because I know that it works. There we go. There we go. Okay. So we'll talk about it. Well, let me make sure that it's up. Okay, it is. Beautiful. Okay. The story that we've been told is a lie. Big shocker, right? There's so many truths coming out. But the story that we've been told about this is a lie. It's not just for the falsehoods, but because it was encoded to preserve power, not truth. For centuries, the world has been ruled by lineages that trace their right to dominion through sacred texts edited, distorted, and reinterpreted by bloodlines. That's why we're starting with the bloodlines. And I kept telling everybody to hold out for these. There's going to be several episodes. But it was reinterpreted by bloodlines who conquered, enslaved, and erased. But buried within those texts is a far older truth, one not of metaphor or myth, but of ancestral biology, cosmic trauma, and inherited dominion. So this is what we're going to get into it. The flood in Genesis is not simply a tale of divine wrath. Also, for anybody new here and you see me looking down, it's because I write notes about everything because I easily get off track and I don't have a teleprompter. So I look at my notes a lot. So the flood in Genesis wasn't a tale of divine wrath or some isolated act of cleansing, right? If anybody's into archaeology, you already know that. It's a spiritual, but more of a biological reset, one that realigns humanity's trajectory, codifying species inheritance and setting the foundation for a blood-based covenant that would echo through every empire to come. Most mainstream interpretations treat the flood as a punishment for human wickedness. You guys know my theory on that. So much of what we're indoctrinated with is how terrible we are. We're unhealthy and we're lustful and we're wrathful and we're nasty and all of the descriptors we can attribute to the Abrahamic God as well, but it's sort of projected onto us. But what if it was more than that, more than a punishment for human wickedness, much, much more? When the waters receded, three sons stood at the edge of a new world: Japheth, Ham, and Shem. Those lineages, Japheth, Ham, and Shem, are not simply ethnic or geographic branches of humanity. Hi, Eddie. Thank you for being here. Oast to you as well. These are archetypal lines. Archetypal. This is what they follow, and this is what they labeled them. Okay. So these archetypal lines are the colonizer, Japheth, the mystic, Ham, and the witness, Shem. Each was given governance over specific peoples, regions, and spiritual functions. They did not create the nations. Just like Genesis will tell you, there were people there before and there were people there after. Just like there were giants around before and there were giants around after the flood. So they didn't create the nations, right? It was the inheritance as told in the Bible and other ancient texts. Remember, Yahweh's inheritance was Israel, which was never a land. It's the name of a tribe, a people. We were told they were brothers, but they're more than that. They're lineages, they're codes. It's codes where they can talk to each other. They were hominid archetypes, fragments of ancient humanity, each bearing the genetic memory of a different branch of our origins. Hi, Compassionate and Callous. Thanks for being here. Okay. Thus, the flood was not an ending. It was the beginning of a reorganized humanity. Oh, you guys aren't even seeing. Oh, yeah, you are. Wow, it's really behind. Okay. The flood was not the end. It was the beginning. Okay. A species divided world. We're all pretty much aware of this, right? Like there were Neanderthals, there were Homo sapiens, there were Denisovians, there was Homo floresiensis. There were a lot of hominids around at that time, right? A lot of people, not all of them humid, which is where we get Homo sapien. We still have a lot of people on the planet, and not all of them are human. So this was a species divided world where roles were assigned, covenants were drawn, and blood was no longer just a life force. It was a legacy. This is why I tell you all the time, the elites are more concerned with blood than with race. After the flood, humanity's future was not left to chance. It was divided into three functional archetypes, anchored in their blood pact with each other: Japheth, Ham, and Shem. Each son did not merely produce a family tree. They inherited the spheres of influence, spiritual frequency, and genetic stewardship of peoples who were already there. So let's talk about them a little bit. Japheth. This is a Neanderthal, by the way. Neanderthals started white, blonde hair, blue eyes. They have a different allele. There are two different white alleles, which we will get into at one of the Bloodline series. All right. Japheth is the line of expansion and structure. He is associated with the Neanderthal admixed Rh negative populations who migrated into cold climates, marked by hierarchical thinking, territorial dominance, and system building. The Japhetic legacy manifests in empire, governance, and colonization. This line would eventually become the root of the Greco-Roman power, the Gothic kings, and the modern Western Empire. It is the archetype of the architect, but a little too tempted to becoming the colonizer. So, Ham. Let's talk about Ham. Ham is the mystic, the keeper of rhythm and earth alignment. His line is tied to the Denisovan admixture and indigenous frequencies, earth-based knowledge, ritual memory, and the ability to hold cosmic consciousness in embodied ways. Ham's descendants included Kemet, which is Egypt, Cush, which is Ethiopia, Punt, Nubia, Melanesia, and early South Asian civilizations. His line was not cursed, it was feared. And the empire distorted this fear into a lie about servitude, erasing the line's sacred function, which are the carriers of spiritual technology. We'll get more into that later, too. Adrian says, shout out to Rhythm. Compassionate. Uh-oh. All right, let's talk Shem. Shem is the prophetic witness, the one who bridges the other lines. He's associated with the first ancient Homo sapien expression. Shem carries the legacy of spiritual law, oral tradition, and moral continuity. The Shemitic line gave rise to prophetic consciousness, spiritual lineage, and later the messianic stream. Shem holds the covenant, but it was never meant to use for domination. His role was to remind. Shem's line is a carrier of universal law, covenant, and remembrance. They were and are the Semites, the Hebrews, the Arabs, the Assyrians, those whose prophetic bloodline walked between the worlds, often targeted, co-opted, or destroyed, and easily manipulated by the Japheths. He's the youngest, give him a break. So this is the true Genesis, okay? A spiritual and genetic inheritance war inside a story of rainbows and animals, kind of reframed as morality play, but rooted in species level trauma and the spiritual coding of empire. These were not just random sons of somebody named Noah. There were flood survivors in every civilization. These names were chosen by the Abrahamic religions because they were strands of the human species. And it tells the elites or the powers that be who is who. They have traits rooted in both genetic and spiritual design. They were given lands, peoples, and memory to protect, not to exploit. And it is the distortion of those roles that created the system we now call empire. Japheth is the oldest, compassionate. So understanding these lines not as ethnicity, but as assigned inheritance is the key to decoding the bloodline war we're still living through. And only by returning each line to its original purpose can we begin to rebuild a world that's beyond conquest. So let's talk about the empire because it starts with Japheth and then his brothers. The empire of Japheth was never content with just ruling some land and some people. It had to conquer memory and with it, the other bloodlines. It hunted Ham through colonization, slavery, and demonization. It twisted Shem into tools of power, the bankers, the scribes, the religious functionaries, grafting sacred identity into institutional control. Japheth's line has a long, long history of burning sacred lands, the chains of slavery, the erasure of indigenous cosmologies, and the systematic separation of body from earth, spirit from womb, and people from memory. His was the seed of architecture, metallurgy, law, and war, tools of balance that he used for control. The world he would shape was not curved like a womb, but straight-edged like a fortress. Japheth's descendants stretched north and west into Europe and the steppes of Central Asia. From his line came Gomer, the forefather of the Gauls. If you've watched my Goth shows, my Neanderthal shows, you know who that is. Magog, linked to the Scythians, the Goths, and later Khazars. Javan, the father of Greek dominion, and Ashkenaz, the progenitor of a high caste line that would one day rule banking, commerce, and shadow empires. This bloodline codified hierarchy and created the illusion of divine right. See how when we say it's a spiritual war, it's because they made it a spiritual war. The Rh negative trait, once rare, became a marker of royalty. That's why they call them blue bloods. They're set apart, protected, and weaponized. So let's talk about Ham. Ham came from the soil. Ham bore the line of the Denisovans, the deep earth dwellers, high mountain dwellers, soul rich, intuitive, genetically resilient. His descendants would cradle ancient technologies of the spirit, geometry of the gods, medicine of the plants, and maps of the stars. Where Japheth carved stone into a system, Ham carved soul into the stone. Ham's blood ran through Cush, which is Ethiopia and the Nile Valley, the keepers of the Ark. Mizraim, which is Kemet, Egypt, where language and light were cast in stone. Put, which is Libya, Maghreb, and guardians of some oral cosmology. And Canaan, the bridge between mysticism and prophecy, demonized by Japhetic scribes to justify homicide. This is the bloodline of rhythm, earth connection, matrilineal spirituality with patrilineal order and sacred geometry. And for that, they were enslaved, demonized, and erased. The so-called curse of Ham was not a divine punishment against Ham. It was a declaration of war on the Denisovan soul code. So Shem. Let's talk about Shem. These are all different lines of Shem. Shem came from the breath. Shem carried the unmutated Homo sapien code, not hybridized as it eventually became, but whole. His legacy was not empire or temple, but covenant. In him lived the prophetic instinct, the ability to remember not just the past, but the contract beneath it. Shem's seed would become Eber, which is the root of the word Hebrew, meaning one who crosses over. Aram, the father of the Armenians and the voice of the prophets, and Ashur, the forerunner of empire corrupted and later broken. This line bridged the others. When Japheth conquered and Ham remembered, Shem would bear witness. But over time, even Shem's descendants were fragmented, stolen, and co-opted. Prophets were executed, scriptures were edited, tribes were scattered, and some of Shem's blood was absorbed into the empire that once hunted it. Remember, the story of Noah is not a creation story. There were already people all over the earth. Think about Cain and Abel. There were already people all over the earth. It's a destruction story, a story of the Great Flood, which did happen. Archaeologists already have shown that it happened. But it's the beginning of the story of world domination. The ark concealed a deeper truth, not the salvation of mankind, but the survival of specific bloodlines chosen to inherit and rule post-cataclysmic Earth. These were not merely families. They were the vessels of three distinct hominid forces, each carrying ancient wisdom, ancestral memory, and genetic assignment to reshape the world in their image. Their image. Hi, Rael. Thank you for being here. What followed the flood was not harmony. After that. It was a spiritual and biological war of inheritance. This is why in all the Abrahamic religions, inheritance is such a huge thing. But like I've said, they were not alone. And we'll talk about those other people in an upcoming broadcast. The bloodlines are not just biology, they are assignments. Each son's inheritance was not a reward, it was a function of spiritual design, but the design was corrupted. Today, the Neanderthal elite rule the world through banking and finance, military and surveillance, global tech and data mining, genetic manipulation, right? We know that. The Denisovan remnant lives through earth-based indigenous cultures, Afro-rooted spiritual systems, sacred architecture and plant wisdom, resistance movements tied to rhythm and land. The Shemite remnant walks between. He walks between the Torah, the Quran, and prophecy. He is in the hidden Hebrew descendants across Africa and the Hebrew diaspora. He is in the hybridized tribes carrying both the trauma and the memory. But none of these lines are at peace. And unless the war in the blood is acknowledged, it will be repeated again and again for generations to come. Now, in some future episodes, this is just an introduction to this way of looking at the Bible and bloodlines. So future episodes will look deeper. There will be more receipts. Respect to you as well, Corey McPherson. Thank you for being here. So it'll go deeper. So we'll look into a little deeper into Ham's line and Shem's line and the true spirituality of humanity. So I will address that so-called curse of Ham and what that means, and the first time we heard about it, because it was Moses that heard about it first. We'll talk about giants and who those people were, and the one true God. Okay, the receipts will be coming. So for more info on Japheth's line, I would say go back to the Goths videos, part 1 and 2, the Hitler episode, and the Khazars, part 1 through 3. You'll learn everything you need to know about Japheth's line. So we're going to talk a lot more about Ham's line, Shem's line, and the line of the giants and who those people were. So I appreciate you guys being here. It's a bit of a short one, but I just wanted to introduce the concept before we start getting into more lines. When we talk about Ham's line and spiritual technology, there's going to be a show about the pyramids, because we're going to talk about what science actually shows about the pyramids, and why we keep getting weird mystical woo-woo things about the pyramids, even though science, so we'll talk about that. We'll also, when we talk about Shem's line and the prophetic line, we will talk about how Jesus was not Jewish. So there will be receipts for those as well. So hopefully, yes, Adric, it was the quickie. And please hit the like button real quick, Adrian says. So hopefully you can be here next Sunday. Hopefully you guys can be here. This is going to be several episodes, because this is a little bit of a shocking premise to some people about what these lines in this biblical story actually meant. I think I've already proven to you that the elites, the empire, actually don't necessarily care about race. They care about blood. So we'll keep going with that. We'll have a lot of episodes. Hope you always can hang. And then, of course, still every Wednesday, we're taking apart the Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch by J.J. Hertog. So there will be a reading of each key that comes out on Mondays. And then Wednesday, we kind of break it down. Funny enough, when we're breaking it down, it actually plays into these shows that I'm doing on Sundays. So it's sort of all synchronicity. It's kind of coming together. Ryle says Putin pulled their card with his release last year. Yeah, about Tartaria. So I need to respond to somebody who put out a video, and so there probably will be a video where I bring up Tartaria. And it'll be about wizards of the old world and these old civilizations, because I'm kind of talking about it now. So I need to respond to somebody else. So when you see that, don't think that it's completely out there in left field. It actually all plays together. So I hope you guys have a great Sunday. If I don't see you this Wednesday, I'll see you next Sunday. And I'm going to show you a picture of my dog. But before I go, I love you. I miss you. You're my favorite. Please like the video if you haven't already. It really helps the algorithm to know what kind of things you like. Share where you think it's appropriate, especially to someone who you think needs to hear it. And don't forget to check out some of the wilder Pivot Point Wednesday shows. And last, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you want to break down complex concepts that make the esoteric not so teric, helping you on your journey to become your most authentic self. By subscribing, you'll join a community that thrives on curiosity and growth, and you'll never miss out on insights and some wild discussions. Let's uncover the universe together.